Hi everyone. I am not wearing Spartan green. I'm wearing a Kalamazoo t-shirt. I did go to Michigan State for grad school and I do bleed green, but I've been a Bronco for 22 years now and I never cheer against Western, and that includes when Western plays Michigan State. So first and foremost a Bronco, but a close second is Michigan State. So I'm sporting the green, but it's a Kalamazoo t-shirt. Okay, oh boy, yeah, I've got the hair slicked back because I refuse to get a haircut. That looks like a Pat Riley hairstyle. You guys don't even know who that is probably. He was an NBA coach and he would always slick his hair back, probably because he didn't want to get a haircut too. So it is what it is. All right, I want to take this opportunity to explain what SMED is, and I'm going to try to do that so that it's actually interesting, because you're thinking, how could that possibly be interesting and exciting? And I'm going to do that by first defining it, which will not be very interesting. Okay, so SMED is single minute exchange of die. It's literally being able to move tools and equipment in and out super fast, so factories can build different things at the same place at the same time without losing too much in efficiency and cost efficiency. So think about that. You're in a factory, it's making different products, and you have to change tools and equipment to accommodate different products, and single minute exchange of die is simply being able to move those tools and equipment in and out in record time, rather than hours, in minutes or seconds. Okay, so that's what SMED is. It's basically a way of doing things, a tool, a technique, a practice that's typically associated with manufacturing processes in factories. And again, I teach a SMED class, but I spend very little time actually on SMED because I think you're majoring in the broader concept of looking at every process as a problem to be solved. And that problem to be solved is figuring out how you can do that process better, faster, and cheaper. And SMED is simply a technique or tool that's very specific to manufacturing processes. So rather than having a class dedicated to a specific tool typically associated with manufacturing processes, let's just focus on building your problem-solving skills in general so that it could be applied to any and all processes. Okay, and that's basically what you're majoring in. You're not majoring in SMED. SMED is a part of what you're majoring in. I think personally you're just basically majoring in problem solving. And oddly enough, managers are telling us the most important skill set associated with everyone that they hire, especially straight out of school, is problem solving. It's no longer leadership. Problem solving is number one right now. So the number one skill set wanted by managers is what you're majoring in, and it's what we're teaching you. The curriculum from beginning to end is trying to develop your problem-solving skills. Okay, so now back to SMED. Okay, let's start with where it all began. During World War II, the United States basically blew up and leveled off Japan, especially Tokyo, the industrial part of Japan. So after World War II, Japan was left completely leveled. Likewise, Germany was too, because during World War II, we did the same thing to Germany. So Germany and Japan both had to rebuild. And I consider Germany and Japan to be the two most significant and the greatest economic miracles of the last 100 to 200 years. Two countries that were completely leveled off during World War II, and then within 10 years following World War II, they were industrialized nations. That is basically an entire generation from those two countries sucking it up and suffering for future generations so that they could live better. And they did that, and they accomplished that, and they did it in record time. I always said if that had happened to the United States, that likewise we would have had an entire generation that suffered on our behalf. But fortunately, we didn't have to have that happen. But then again, the generation that grew up during the Great Depression and liberated the world during World War II was one of the greatest generations ever. So think about that. That generation that fought during World War II, their childhood was the Great Depression. And then they came back after World War II and basically spawned the baby boomers. And it was an amazing experiment because it also spawned the strongest, most dominant middle class that we've ever seen before in record time. So in Germany and Japan, They had to build new factories, but they couldn't build a bunch of new factories. So companies in Germany and Japan, and in Japan in particular, said, look, we have just enough resources to build one factory. So if we want to build multiple products, we can't build different factories for each product. Back in the United States after World War II, remember, America in general wasn't impacted by World War II in terms of our resources being depleted and factories being blown up. It wasn't on American turf in general outside of Pearl Harbor. So in the United States following World War II, the economy just boomed. It was on fire. Furthermore, some of our bigger industries didn't have a lot of competition, especially non-American competition. So in the United States, when companies wanted to build new and different products, they built new factories. So company A was building product A, they would build a factory for product A. Then they wanted to make product B, they would build a factory for product B. They'd have dedicated factories and resources for different products. And they would just keep making the same thing over and over again. Factory A would make product A over and over and over again. Factory B would make product B over and over and over again, and so forth. So they had dedicated facilities to dedicated products, and they would just make the same thing over and over again, driving down costs and improving quality. And they thought that was the most efficient and best way to deliver products to the customer. And in general, it kind of worked, but as I'll point out in a little bit here, there were some flaws associated with that manufacturing strategy. So back in Japan and Germany, for example, specifically Japan, they would build a factory and say, look, we're going to make an engine plant. And we're probably going to make 20 different engines and 6 different versions of each engine, and we can't build different factories for each of these different engines. So they decided, all right, we're going to have to build different products at the same place, at the same time, using the same resources. And one of the major things that they did is, when they built these new factories, they laid out the manufacturing process and they put in technology, if you will, that would be able to move tools and equipment in and out in record time. So for example, they would have these conveyors on the ceilings that could take giant pieces of tooling and equipment and move them out in seconds versus hours or days to accommodate different products. So product A would come down the line, they would build it. Product B would come down the line, and they might have to move some tools and equipment in and out to accommodate product B, but they could do it in seconds. Back in the United States, they were using factories that were built before 1900. In the 1980s, I worked in car factories that were built in the early 1900s. So there was no technology in place, and the manufacturing process itself didn't accommodate different products at the same place at the same time. Some of the car factories I worked in, if you wanted to move tools and equipment in and out to build entirely different products, like a 4-door versus a 2-door, for example, it could take hours to move these tools and equipment in and out because they were gigantic, and we didn't have systems and processes and a layout in place that accommodated different products at the same place at the same time. So the Japanese and Germans said, look, we're building new factories after World War II, and that was part of their competitive advantage when they came to the United States in the 70s and 80s, is that they were building products and facilities that were relatively new. And American manufacturing facilities in the 70s and 80s were approaching 50, 60, 70, 80, up to 100 years old, and they were competing against products being made in more current facilities. Now, if you look at American factories today, they tend to be relatively new, and they're extremely flexible and nimble, and they can move tools and equipment in and out in record time. Why? Because they built them accordingly. They built them based on that need and that desire. So we caught up to that. Some of the most flexible factories in the world are our newest, and some of those tend to be in the auto industry. A lot of those are at General Motors, and specifically in Michigan, like Lansing, Michigan. They can move products in and out in record time. You could take one product that's built in another country and probably have it built in Lansing in a day and a half, because they can move stuff in and out that quickly because of the layout, the processes, and the technology that's built into that facility to accommodate completely different products. So in Japan, they decided that they were going to create systems and processes and put in technology that would allow them to basically move tools and equipment out in record time. That's single minute exchange of die. Okay, that's what SMED is. Another part of SMED was they decided that instead of putting in robots and specialized tools, they were going to put in general purpose tooling and equipment so that they could be used on different products and different versions of those different products. and they would train and empower and motivate workers to use that general purpose tooling and equipment. So after World War II and going into the 70s and 80s, a lot of American companies decided to replace workers with robots. The problem with robots, especially back then, is that they can only do the same thing over and over and over again. And they actually made more mistakes than people. And as far as flexibility is concerned and doing things differently, robots weren't very good. They had to be reprogrammed, they had to be stopped, and then when you did that, they didn't do things very well. So a lot of American factories, for example at General Motors and IBM, they got gutted and replaced with expensive robots, and the robots can only do the same thing over and over again. The idea was economies of scale, drive down costs, cost efficiency. But then these companies were competing against Japanese and German companies. They were offering customers more choices and more options and more variety without having to pay more, and customers gravitated towards the Germans and the Japanese because they said, wait a second, I could buy this and have more options and choices and more customization, but when I buy it from an American company, they're only giving me one option and one choice, and it's not even cheaper. Okay, so the Japanese decided to, yes, use SMED, single minute exchange of die, build in systems, processes, and technology that let them move tools and equipment in and out super fast to accommodate different products being built at the same place at the same time using the same resources. They also empowered their workers. They used more general purpose tooling. Think of it this way. Instead of using a robot, just use a general purpose welding tool. So you have welders, right? You have a welder person and a welder tool. 2-door comes down the line, zap, zap, zap. 4-door comes down the line, zap, zap, zap. The worker knows what to do if he or she sees a 4-door car, and they have general purpose tooling and welding equipment. It's not a robot, so it'll work on the 2-door and the 4-door. So general purpose tooling used by trained, skilled, motivated, empowered workers was a huge part of the Japanese and the Germans being able to be flexible, nimble, customized products with no increase in cost, and giving customers more options and choices, and building different things at the same place at the same time using the same resources. Another huge part of this was you might be building 20 different products at the same place at the same time using the same resources, but there's nothing that says you can't have mostly the same parts across all 20 different products. So for example, if you look at Toyota products, the stuff that you can't see, all the parts are the same. They're all bought from the same suppliers in huge quantities to give them economies of scale to drive down costs. It's brilliant. And companies like GM, Ford, and Chrysler, they do all of this now as well. For example, when you buy a GM crossover SUV, whether it's a Buick, GMC, Chevy, whatever it is, they're built at the same place at the same time using the same resources. The only difference is the badging, the brand, the image, the marketing. So they build them, and all the stuff that you can't see, they all use the same parts from the same suppliers. Then at the very end, they slap on Buick, or they slap on Chevy, or they slap on GMC. All that stuff is made in Lansing, Michigan. You might be paying a premium for Buick over GMC or the other way around versus a Chevy, or whatever your preference is. They might have different options and packages, but in essence, they're all the same vehicles. They're built off of the same platform. Even if the exterior design is a little different, for the most part, high levels of standardization allow them to drive down costs while also offering modest amounts of customization, meaning you get something different without having to pay a premium for it. Okay, so basically that's kind of a wrap on SMED. And the other part of this too is there's this technique called postponement, and Dell did this in the PC market where PCs became a commodity and they wanted something to compete on, and they wanted to basically charge a premium, and a premium that customers would be willing to pay more for. So what Dell did a long time ago is they created this technique called postponement. What that basically means is every PC, if you look at it, I'm looking at one right now, it's a bunch of commodities, all the parts are the same, and they're kind of cheap. So what Dell did is they kept making the same thing over and over and over again, using the same parts across different products, buying the parts from the same suppliers, driving down costs. Then they would stop or postpone production. And then they would go to the customer and say, okay, what do you want in a computer. For example, what are your compatibility needs? What are your speed needs? What are you going to use this computer for? And we'll build that into the computer. So PCs became a commodity where you couldn't tell the difference between a Dell or anything else. And Dell didn't like that because you couldn't charge a premium in the market for that, and therefore your margins weren't very good. So people start saying, wait a second, I can buy something from Dell and I can tell them exactly what my needs are. They'll zap that into the computer and I'll pay more for that, and Dell widens its margins that way. But it used extremely high levels of standardization up to a certain point in the production process, and then it stopped or postponed production and said, okay, now zap in the customization for our customers. They think they're getting this super customized PC, but the vast majority of it is just all the same across all of their PCs because they're highly standardized. That entire process or technique is called postponement, and basically all products in all factories probably use some version of postponement because companies are obsessed with giving customers exactly what they want, because you can charge a premium for that kind of customization, which means you widen your margins, but you also want to drive down costs. So what you do is you figure out how much can I really standardize the product and just buy the same stuff over and over again and just make the same thing over and over again, but what do I customize after that to pull in the customer and charge them a premium for that? Okay, the semester is coming to a close. You just took the intro supply chain management class with me. The goal of the class was to get you excited about what you're majoring in and give you an overview of the different parts of what you're majoring in. We've discussed different types of skill sets, soft skills, hard skills, the different classes you're going to take, what you're going to learn in those classes. And the idea is that when you go to the career fair next semester, you can talk the talk. You're excited about what you're majoring in. You know what you're getting yourself into. You know what you need to do the next 2 years to graduate successfully. You know what you need to do the first 3 to 5 years after you graduate to be more successful. So I hope I've accomplished that in this intro class. The next class that you're going to take with me is Management 3810. This used to be our SMED class, where we spent the entire semester learning about SMED. And remember, previously I said this was a very specific technique for doing things better, faster, and cheaper that was very specific to operations management in the manufacturing environment. In other words, factories. Okay? So what I've done is I've taken that class and I moved away from that. I've focused on just developing your broader problem-solving skill sets in general. Again, I look at everything on this planet, especially within jobs, as a process. Every job has processes associated with it, and within those processes are more processes. And every process is a problem to be solved. And what's the problem? How do I do it better, faster, and cheaper? And that's why employers are telling us when they're interviewing you, they want to determine, do you know how to solve problems? What does that mean? Do you know how to look at everything as a process and figure out how to do it better, faster, and cheaper? And if you can articulate that during an interview, that you know that that's important to the manager, and then demonstrate with deliverables and results like a class, training, projects, and work experiences, that you know how to do those things, you're going to be fine with the job market. So what I've done with this class is I've identified projects, problem-solving projects in the real world, locally, in industry, with companies, with local supply chain managers. They have problems and they want you to help solve them. So what we basically do is, in the intro class, I just babbled and lectured and you read and you took tests. Very traditional format. So in the next class, Management 3810, the problem-solving class, I do just the opposite. We meet once and I cut you loose. I mentor you, I coach you, I stay out of the way, and you go out there and you get your hands dirty. And before COVID, you would actually go on site and help companies and managers solve their problem. So you would go to a kickoff meeting, and then you would probably go there once a week, and then you'd have conference calls with the managers, and you'd work on the problem during the entire semester, and then at the end, you make a presentation that basically said, this is what we recommend, and this will help you do things better, faster, and cheaper. And sometimes students would actually implement their recommendations to see the actual results and deliverables, okay? So now COVID-19 has hit, and I thought originally, man, This problem-solving class is not going to be hands-on. It's not going to be in the real world. Before COVID, students would do these projects in my Management 3810 class, and they'd put these projects on their resume, and employers would look at it as a professional work experience. The managers knew, wait a second, you didn't work 40 hours a week. It wasn't an internship. It wasn't paid, but you know what? You spent an entire semester solving that problem. And you know what? That problem is a problem that we have. As far as I'm concerned, that's a glorified internship experience. That's professional work experience. It may as well have been a full-time internship. And that's how it came across. So in this class, I literally hand every student in the program a professional work experience. Then COVID-19 hit, and what we've done now is we're teaming up with companies in the same manner, but now we're doing projects virtually, remotely. Does that sound a little familiar to you? Over half of America's workforce right now is working remotely, virtually, and with great success. What we're finding out is that there are a lot of jobs out there that can be done remotely and virtually with amazing results. It takes work and effort, and mistakes are made, and you have to learn from those mistakes. So in preparation of the job market, and because of COVID-19, when you walk into my Management 3810 class, chances are I'm going to hand you a project, a professional work experience, like I have in the past, but it's not going to be face-to-face on-site at the company. It's actually opened up new doors for us because now we can help companies solve problems globally, and these companies don't need to be local Southwest Michigan companies. This summer, I'm running all of my projects with a company in Eastern Michigan in the Metro Detroit area that's a first-tier auto supplier. And we're doing everything remotely and virtually. And moving forward after COVID-19, yes, people will go back to work. They'll be back in the office, but let's face it, they're not going to go back into the office as often as they did pre-COVID because it's not necessary. So I anticipate employers trying to figure out, do you have the skill sets, the soft skills, the hard skills, to work virtually and remotely and deliver and generate results? Okay, they're going to try to tap into that. I've had managers actually talk to me about this, and they said, moving forward, they're going to test you on, can you work virtually? And the best way to do that is say, yes. And they'll say, prove it. Well, I've actually done it, and this is what I learned. These are the mistakes I made, and these are the deliverables and results that I achieved from working remotely and virtually. So we're actually going to hand you a remote virtual project with a company, and you'll work on the project during the semester. And when it's all said and done, you'll still have a professional work experience, a problem-solving experience on your resume. Okay? So you have a lot to look forward to, and you might be labeled as the COVID generation. That doesn't mean you won't be job ready day one. Our students in the past, because of this class, because of these projects, because it was hands-on, because it was on-site, combined with their work experiences that were paid, like internships and co-op positions, you add all that stuff up, and managers used to say, your students are as job ready day one as any students out there on the job market. We don't want to change that. You can still go through the program and potentially not get a face-to-face, hands-on, on-site internship and still be okay. I would encourage you, though, don't depend on this class and this project to get a great job after you graduate. I'm encouraging students potentially maybe pull back a little bit and wait for this thing to pass so that you can get that on-site internship and co-op experience. So the point I'm trying to make is this class will help you a lot when you take it, but ideally maybe you need to think about delaying graduation just a little bit. So let's say you're an April grad and you have 0 work experience. All right. What if you delayed graduation until December of next year? In other words, don't graduate in April of 2021. Graduate in December of 2021 and make certain that you land an internship in the summer of 2021, especially with a company that you'd like to work for full-time after graduation and a company that typically offers full-time jobs to its interns if they do a good job. So I think it's better to delay graduation 1 semester, pick up an internship that pays $20 an hour during the summertime, and have a full-time job waiting for you at the end of December of 2021 versus graduating in April and being unemployed and companies picking you up at a discount because you have 0 work experience. Furthermore, the companies that tend to pick up our students with 0 work experience, Those jobs aren't always the best, and they tend to be glorified internships themselves. For example, they don't pay well, the benefits aren't great, the jobs aren't directly related to what you're majoring in. They could be a sales position, for example, at a non-asset based 3PL or 4PL, which is not what you maybe wanted to begin with, but you take it because it's the only offer on the table. So again, I think you're going to be okay. Just be strategic and think about, hey, if I delay graduation, really, what's the downside? If you take an internship, you're still making $20 an hour. If you're delaying graduation, all right, you might need to sign a lease to stay someplace. If you're delaying graduation, maybe you can spread your course load out a little bit, work part-time during the school year more, maybe pick up your grades, that sort of thing. So again, I think it's a matter of delaying graduation for all the right reasons. The best reason is to pick up actual professional full-time work experience, translation, working 40 hours a week, a co-op position, or an internship. And you might need to do that, but we'll talk about that, and that's why I encourage you, no matter what, moving forward, let's have some face-to-face meetings. Even if it's still COVID, we can meet someplace and stay 6 feet apart and wear masks and be outdoors. We don't want to lose out on that mentorship just because this thing has happened to us. All right, that's it. I will talk to you soon. And I'm going to attach one more video to this in the email that will enlighten you more on how big SMED is and how it's transformed the way companies build stuff in their factories. Remember, different products and different versions of products built at the same place at the same time using the same resources, with no loss in cost efficiency, and being able to give customers more choices and more options. In other words, you command higher premiums, you widen your margins, and customers are happier because they get more choices in what they're buying from you. All right.